Asbury Park has seen boom and bust, windfalls and downfalls, catastrophe, and Bruce Springsteen. A year after it played a minor role in the story of the Matawan Maneater, but a couple decades before it would witness a burned out cruise liner wash up on its shore, another fire would gut 4 entire city blocks, causing the city to consider dynamite as a solution and edge out America's entry into World War I as front page news. It features fire, explosions, and the shore, as all proper Jersey stories do. And of all things, it was started by a swimming pool. Welcome to Words and Coffee, where we talk interesting history about the Garden State and showcase a bag of small batch roasted goodness. Today's brew is Blazing Brew by Axe and Ammo. And the history is the Asbury Park Fire of 1917. Let's get to it. April can be a lonely time on the shore. Shoulder season is a fickle one. Sometimes warm enough to swim, but just as likely cold enough to snow, and all of it carried on a persistent ocean breeze. Sparsely populated during the cooler months, it could be said that things were still in the quiet hum of hibernation, with the full-time locals enjoying another month of peace and quiet before the busy summer season kicked off. In the neighborhood where the convention center and the Stone Pony stand today, things looked quite different in 1917. In addition to single-family homes, there were also the usual buildings you'd expect in any seaside resort town: hotels, theaters, and amusement halls, as well as a stout brick church for Sunday services. The only structure for miles not made almost entirely out of flammable wood. Lastly, and in a major case of redundancy, an indoor pool across the street from the beach. I've never really understood that. It's like, there's the water. You want some water next to your water so you can sit in the water while you're looking at the water? I digress. Point is, the pool, or natatorium, as it was called,
which was the style at the time,
was a modern addition to the area attractions. The large swimming pool was the main draw, but it also offered hot baths and was located all the way out here, at the edge of the beach and across Ocean Avenue. If you know, you know. Now, before I describe the events that follow, just keep in mind we're talking about a building filled with water, concrete, and tile. April is a fickle season, and on the night of the 5th, it happened to be a cold rain. This would be a blessing of sorts, preventing the forthcoming disaster from becoming a catastrophe. The natatorium was actually one of the few businesses open that night, and several bathers were inside the building when they saw smoke. At some point during the natatorium's construction, for reasons that remain a mystery, someone was in a rush. Either the boss was pushing the schedule, or an electrician wanted to wrap early. Regardless of the underlying cause, the result was faulty wiring and a fire. Consuming the wooden frame and probably deck chairs, the bathhouse was soon wall-to-wall in flames, and that was only the beginning. Ocean Avenue was a reasonably broad roadway, wide enough for 2 cars to comfortably pass each other side by side. Unfortunately, the seaside wind was up that evening. A 65-mile-an-hour gale fed the growing inferno and pushed it off of the natatorium and onto the first block. Within 2 minutes, the intense heat ignited the Murphy and King amusement hall, the first domino. Now this is where it gets bad, because once the fire crossed Ocean Avenue... Okay, that's the last one, I promise. The buildings in that first block were effectively attached, providing an unobstructed path to single-family homes, boarding houses, Daly's Theater, and Grand Central Hotel. All wooden structures. First block was almost entirely consumed by the time anyone had a chance to react. Residents on adjacent streets started to pack up and left the area. In a small mercy, only one hotel was open during the off-season, and its 200 guests had time to safely evacuate, albeit many of them without their belongings. For many buildings, it was already too late, but thankfully the fire department responded just as the blaze began to cross Kingsley Street. Unfortunately, it was quickly escalating beyond their control. The issue wasn't the state of the men or the equipment. There were fire hydrants, and thankfully this time they were actually working. The issue was twofold. the scale, and the weather. Asbury Park simply didn't have enough men to throw at this blaze. The local FD called in help from surrounding towns, but in the minutes it would take for them to arrive, there was no telling how far the damage would spread. The second was the wind. The 65-mile-an-hour gales persisted throughout the night. This both fed the fire and also dissipated much of the fire hose water into an ineffective mist. With the first block a complete loss and the fire now crossing Kingsley Street, Herbert O'Gardner had himself a thought. What if we blow it up? Okay, so just stay with me on this. The idea was, unless they did something drastic, the fire was going to continue spreading inland and consume everything in its path. So why not get out ahead of it and create a fire break? Then there wouldn't be anything for the fire to burn, right? In theory, yeah. Ish. To be clear, this is a legitimate strategy used by real actual firefighters, minus the explosives anyhow. However, it's all contingent on whether you actually remove the fuel, i.e. the building. Owing to the relatively small amount of dynamite they could get on such short notice, reckon the stuff was just available in your local Ace Hardware in those days, the explosion was lacking. Herb set off 2 charges in the basement of the Ardsley Hotel. Unfortunately, this only succeeded in doing minimal damage to the structure, and then the rubble caught fire anyway. Not to Monday morning quarterback this thing, as I have no doubt that these guys were simply desperate, but I have to wonder if Herb didn't at least partly do it for the lulz. Following this, one witness reported seeing a flaming timber carried by the wind and crash through an upstairs window of the Whelan house, starting a fire on the 3rd block. Meanwhile, firefighters departed Jersey City and headed for Asbury Park by special train to lend assistance, but they were still 34 miles away, and minutes might make the difference. The 3rd block was eventually consumed, and the fire was said to be so hot that witnesses reported it was hot as the fires of heck. The street was later renamed in memory of this incident.
And that's where we get the term.
Okay, that one's not true. That one's not true. We reached the 4th and final block. With help arriving, all firefighters converged on Grand Avenue, prepared to make their last stand. The Methodist church caught fire. Unlike most of the other structures, the church was made of sturdy brick. It seems to be for this reason, more than any other factor, that the fire slowed just enough that the hoses could finally make a dent. From the Asbury Park Press, flames suddenly appeared in the roof of the church, then from a circular window in the south, a burst of flame that filled the whole opening shot 25 feet toward the street. The Grand Avenue door was opened for an instant, and another great cloud of fire rolled out. The tower caught fire, appeared in other sections of the roof. The building was gone. The church was destroyed, but served to contain the fire until the firefighters could get it under control. The high wind turned out to be a 2-edged sword. It helped to spread the fire in the westward direction, but also prevented it from breaking out to the north or south. Now contained at the church, 4 blocks and the natatorium burned to the ground, and by 3:30 a.m., the flames were finally out. The Asbury Park fire was over. The following morning, April 6, 1917, a calm had descended on Asbury Park. The first responders had gone home to get some well-earned rest. Steam rose lazily from the charred and smoldering remains. The property owners were shaken, certainly, but they were also practical. Already plans were being made to rebuild, perhaps even in time for the summer season. I gotta say, that's a pretty hard bunch. Mayor Clarence Hetrick went to the emergency command post where about 50 people still remained. America was at war, he declared. The night that Asbury Park was fighting for its city, 200 miles away, Congress was in session. The topic at hand? Oh, just a little dust-up across the pond. America had officially entered World War I. Mayor Clarence mentioned this because, as an oceanfront town, Asbury Park would have a part to play in civil defense. This was a time when cross-Atlantic land invasion was still seen as a concern, and also the city would be expected to provide names of able-bodied young men fit for military service. Hey, remember when we had to be worried about drafts? You got to appreciate the double whammy this must have been for the town who had just seen 4 blocks go up in smoke. I think what really drives this home is the fact that the following day, America's entry into the Great War had to share a headline with the fire and over $1 million in damage that had been sustained. It's a story of perseverance, of decisive and quick thinking, and a part of New Jersey history. That'll about do it for me. If you stuck with me this far, thank you so much for watching. Sources in the description as usual. This has been Words and Coffee. Until next time.